Well. Limbus Company, eh? I don't think I can say much that I haven't already said, but that's a lie. Look at the runtime. If you've clicked on this video, then you fall into one of three camps. 1. You're a subscriber of mine, meaning that you're handsome and your presence alone is so strong that you intimidate polar bears. 2. You just saw Limbus Company in the title and thumbnail and decided to click on the video, in which case, hi. Or 3. You're one of my most dedicated and beloved haters, and if that's the case, I can't thank you enough for your continued support. But regardless of what camp you fall into, what a wild year it's been for this game and the community. I myself have had it kinda rough with flip-flopping between loving and hating the new content that was added, and I'm not gonna pull any punches with my feelings in this video. This video will contain a lot of negative criticism, but also a ton of positive to balance it out, because Limbus Company does deserve praise for certain things it does, and I will wholeheartedly give it the fanboying it deserves. However, I feel the need to point out that yes, this is not unbiased. I am a Project Moon soy boy. I have 160 videos on my channel, all dedicated to the games. I have stuck with Limbus this long through thick and thin, and I have never once backed down on my want for this game to get better. I have spent extortionate money on official merchandise, I have these many hours in the games, I have all the achievements in Ruin, I own a Hakma body pillow that I got through a sponsorship from doing Project Moon videos. Look, you get the point. Everything in this video, from harsh to happy, is from a sincere and true place of love. When I talk ill of these games, it's just because I want to see them get better. I cherish the parts that shine for me, but I also get gut-wrenchingly disappointed when Project Moon makes a misstep. And I can't let all their little mistakes go unnoticed. But Davey, I thought you quit the game. I have. Mostly, and I'll get to that at the end of the video. But I was writing this script since the last time I uploaded, and I've been toiling around whether I actually wanted to make this video or not for quite a while. But I do, since this is a sincere passion project. While Limbus Company videos won't be my main focus going forward, I will definitely keep it on the back burner, and I will go back to it when more content piles up. But until then, consider this my coup de grace Limbus video. I want the story to flesh out more before I make any more rash decisions or big opinions. But if you go on to enjoy this video, a ton of effort went into it, and I primarily make Project Moon content, so please consider subscribing, it means a ton. But enough about me. This video will be split into chapters, so you can choose the ones you want to watch when you want to watch it. Though I would recommend watching all the chapters in subsequent order, since a lot of my critiques lead into each other. And I can't stress that word enough. Critiques. These are, above all else, observations, opinions, personal beliefs, whatever you want to call them. Because if you disagree with anything I say, or you believe this game is a gift from the heavens above, then I am sincerely glad that you can enjoy it as much as you do, since at the end of the day, that's all games are for. Consider this video a thought dump. This is not my retrospective, nor is it my definitive review. It's more so a sequel to my day one review, year one review. Because I've looked at some stuff I've said. Yeah. So, without further ado, 10 chapters, 3 railways, and a whole lot of filler fights later, here we are at Limbus Company 1 year in. Wow, so brave, Dave, starting a Limbus video with Gacha bad, truly mind-blowing stuff. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Gacha is the least of Limbus's issues, but unfortunately I have to contradict that straight away because a ton of its problems all lead back to the game being a live service gacha, and a lot of its troublesome decisions stem from the fact that they're always trying to keep a constant influx of new players flowing into the game. Gacha and random number generators are baked into this game's DNA, and no matter what I try to say or do when talking about the actual gameplay portion of Limbus, it is nigh impossible to ignore the gambling. So it's best we get it out of the way now, and then focus on what I actually care about later, the story, characters, music and whatnot. So where can we even begin other than, well, the beginning, rolling. The bread and butter of any mobile app. Spend money, roll a slot machine for characters, some good, some bad, and some surprisingly godly. Though they probably wouldn't be that surprising as a new player with returning characters like Boys Love Mere Salt. Yeah, one of my major annoyances with Limbus Company is that Project Moon do not have any self-integrity with their story. And while we will discuss this more later, for now we'll just talk about the most visually obvious sign of this. Being that any old Slocum Joe can waltz in, beat Chapter 0 and get Ahab right out of the gate. That is with a small bit of luck though, because yikes, look at those rates. But a chance is still a chance, and in a game where gambling is literally the crux of all the gameplay, it is only fair that this quote-unquote small chance is scrutinised, because I feel like this will ruin someone's enjoyment. I mean, when we all got introduced to Ahab when Canto 5 first dropped, it was a big deal. She was imposing, menacing, and we didn't know what to expect from her. But if you get this ID, you already have a gist of not only what she's going to act like or who she is, but also her fighting style, which personally would really sour my grapes on the whole boss fight experience. Personally, I would love if Project Moon locked off all these IDs until you beat that part of the story. Like, I mean completely lock them off. Don't put them in the gacha list, don't even put them in the shard shop, just make it so they do not exist till you beat that part in the story. Not only would this help not spoil anything, but it would also give players a bit of a drive to beat the chapter, since they know, after the first time it happens, they'll get rewarded with new IDs for doing it, which in turn just helps player engagement. Though, in a perfect world, you just get the batch of IDs for free directly into your account for completing the chapter, but I'm trying to stay realistic here. It would also mean that, on top of the base IDs and Ishi, that you'd actually be getting rewarded naturally for continuing the story, and that gives a good option for players to not interact with the gacha at all. You'd also get a 3-star ID for the character that chapter revolves around, and the more I say, the better an idea I just think it is altogether. Now, Project Moon could still make their pachinko pennies by putting all the miscellaneous IDs from non-present or non-story important organizations into the gacha. Stuff like the Warp IDs or the hell even Rose Panner, since they don't really play a massive role at all. Because, as is, players are practically forced to roll and interact with the gacha to play the game. Because, yes, you can technically beat all the content in the game with the base IDs, but you could also technically watch a wall of paint dry, but something tells me you wouldn't like to do that either. I play with the base IDs a fair amount, especially in Mirror Dungeons, since I do enjoy a challenge in my video games. Limbus is normally piss easy. Press one button with any team combo and win. But if you're using base IDs, it's near enough the same story, but it just takes like 5 times as long. And if you want to get those under 10 turn challenges for Lunacy done, oh brother, you better get those 3-star IDs out. Balls out, Keto. Actually, yeah, consider this a side note. If you find the game aggravatingly easy or as mindless as I do, then I recommend swapping to maining base IDs, but just get ready to not beat any turn-based challenges. If someone, however, can beat all the 10 turn challenges with base IDs, be my guest. And I say that because I'm genuinely hoping someone with more patience than me does it someday to prove me wrong. This brings me into power scaling. It's been a year since the game has launched, and silver and gold tickets are already null and void when it comes to leveling up your characters, since now the newest level cap is around level 40. When at launch it was 30, and up to 4, whoo boy, that was a tough pill to swallow at first, and it still is a bite in the ass with how expensive it is. There is really no fix I can offer here other than slow down the rate at which stuff is getting stronger, and maybe handicap the player in more creative ways other than just number checks. And hey, you know what did that? For like 3 fights, but they did it! In chapter 5.5, the Christmas one, when they force you to only use Dawn and Heath and also lowered the overall strength and number of enemies. I absolutely loved that! Because it was something I wasn't expecting, but it was also just such a creative way to change the difficulty in a natural and story-driven way, other than just big dick DPS checks or forced SP drain. And then they threw all that out the window by giving you the other 9 sinners in a fight later. But hey, it was a step in the right direction. And I'd adore if they did more Sinner-specific fights like this in the future, especially for like showing off combos that you would have never expected, or just showing off some Sinner-specific strengths, kinda like subtle tutorials. It would also help a lot from big battle fatigue, just sending in 6 or 7 Sinners at once to fight hordes and hordes of enemies, that ultimately act as nothing more than filler fights to waste your time, and more importantly, Enkephalin, in the hopes that you either stretch out your playtime, or cave in and buy more Enkephalin with Lunacy. Because as is, I'm royally sick with the fights we have. Look, massive 6 or 7 fights were sick at first, but that goddamn forced SP train is such a lazy and aggravating way to try and balance that. I'm mainly talking about Dong Baek here. Her fight drove me up a wall, and that's one thing I could not imagine doing with base IDs. God almighty, have mercy on the free-to-play purists who put up with her. You guys are the true unsung heroes of this game. I've already talked at length about how I don't like the Runa-esque fights in a previous video, but I will admit now that I was wrong in that video. It was wholeheartedly my fault for trying to play this game like Runa during Railway 1, because when Railway 2 rolled around, I just pressed win rate and I ended with this many turns. Very cool. I was gonna give Railway its own section in this video because I thought I had a lot more to say about it than I actually did, but I don't. I'm not a fan of their overly long nature, and especially not of the enemies having extremely stacked stats. Like, come on, that perk in Railway 2 that gave plus 15% health to enemies was through and through bad game design, because the enemies already had thousands of HP alongside enduring almost everything, so it just turned into a slog. And if you didn't roll for the exact IDs that were metaphors, oh my goodness. Actually, do you know what? I say that, but I can't remember. I think, was it 7 Association were really good in Railway 2? I can't remember. I just used my main team. Oh hey, I said roll again. It all comes back to gacha, see what I mean? It's why I had to talk about it first, but there is one other option in rolling for getting the characters that you want, and that's ego shards. Normally, ego shards were only used for trading for ego or IDs for the ego shard store, but now they're used for uptime too, so you need even more than the bare minimum price just to max out a character. But I digress. For 150 shards, you can get a 2-star ID. Not bad at all, to be honest. I think that's a fair trade. But you need a slimy 400 shards for one singular 3-star ID or ego. One! That's a shit ton of mind-numbingly repetitive and boring mirror dungeons over and over again for one singular character who you then need to spend exorbitant amounts of tickets and thread on just to get to a usable state. As well as more ego shards for Uptide 4 and the inevitable Uptide 5 when that happens, so have fun doing more mirror dungeons for that. Fucking sucks to suck, I ain't doing that shit. And hell, this is assuming that you have purchased the premium battle pass and you're playing regularly, but it's still a massive time investment for one character or ego. And if you're a free to play, that grind is triple, since premium pass owners get 3 times the usual amount of boxes per level. So rolling with your free lunacy is the only way, bucko, and if you don't have the Gamblecore blessing, then you're boned, pal. Just go play the same thing for hours and hours on end, and hopefully your ID won't be considered useless in the next chapter because all the enemies are resistant to one type of attack. Nothing Project Moon has done in the last year has helped this grind, and they've only indirectly made it worse by making mirror dungeons longer. Again, in a perfect world, you could earn IDs from doing more fun stuff in-game, like beating mirror dungeons under certain conditions, or beating certain story stuff. Like, for example, what if you unlocked, say, Warp Faust? No bias here, I promise. And let's say you just get her for doing something simple like having 5 charge related gifts in a single run. Or a 3-star like Warp Ryoshu for having 30 charge on a single character. This rewards you for using the gifts and building around them, but also it's a gradual scale, since you need all the other warp characters from each other achievement beforehand to get the 30 charge on that one character combining all their passives and abilities, meaning that they are saving the best warp ID for last and you don't just blow it all out at once. It's a gradual climb in the achievements and the difficulty of them. If we were to axe the gacha rolling completely and reward IDs through in-game achievements, I think that would be so perfect. Because it adds natural replayability, as well as a healthy small dopamine hit because you earned that character. You earned them through your own ingenuity and cleverness, as opposed to the unhealthy dopamine hit of gambling for them. Combine this with what I said earlier about story-based IDs being awarded through the story, and we have a good, solid single-player experience that actually encourages team building and achievement hunting instead of just the win rate fest we have, where the only time team building is actually ever needed is railways to get your turns down. That's it. I had a few other achievement ideas. They are: you can unlock Encorp Dawn for hitting an enemy inflicted with 5 or more nails with a blunt attack. You can unlock She Heathcliff by defeating an enemy while you're under 30% health. You can unlock Rosepan or Meersalt by being in the same fight for over 20 turns. Now that last one is a bit more tongue-in-cheek since he's overworked in the ID lore, but since the game is extremely humour focused, I think more cute nods like that shouldn't go too far astray. Of course, some challenges will be harder than others, but the better the ID, the more difficult a challenge should be. But then again, that's just my proposal. If the gacha were to disappear tomorrow, please God, that's just how I'd personally implement the character unlocking. Unfortunately, I can't offer any proposal for this next topic other than, well, to get rid of it fully. Walpurg is Nacht, what was once my favourite BlazBlue song, is now the source of all my depression. How times change. Waffles Nacht is the tri-monthly event that Limbus runs, which started in October last year. At first, it was a cute enough novelty, with LobCorp Ego being the forefront, but then we also got Hook Off a Song Blue in the same update, and my feelings immediately dropped. I don't know, man, this just doesn't rub me the right way. The ego is almost excusable since it still somewhat fits the story a bit, but ruin our characters? Look, I'm all for fan service, but only when it's explicitly non-canon. So I just love the fact that all the fan service in Limbus has to be canon for some reason. Gacha mechanics are one thing, sure, they actively harm the game and the player's experience, but I've already talked about how I would personally fix it. But there's one thing I neglected to mention because I was saving it for now, and that's, I don't think IDs should be canon, and the fact that they are is just so silly, goofy even. Again, you can really stretch for the Lob ego being okay, because the whole point of Limbus is going into old Walpurg branches to find the golden bows. It's not a stretch of the imagination that the Sinners would grab some ego along the way. And that would make sense too, because Lobcorp lets us freely swap ego between nuggets, so we know it's like an armory of sorts. And Wonderlab just directly shows us agents gearing up with ego that isn't their own. So the Lobcorp IDs, despite being fan service, don't hurt any immersion or lore too hard. But the ruin, I guess, what's the point, man? On money, that's the point, but that's not the point. All this is just nostalgia bait through and through, with no substance and no merit for existing. And I'm lumping Jack and Pierre in here too, because they were made before PM realised they could just schedule this shit. Like, I'm looking at Hong Lu, and I'm just thinking, who is this for? Let's face the facts, 90% of Limbus fans haven't played Ruina, and for the 10% who have, the sad fact is that most players don't really care or even remember who the hook office are. So, is it even fan service? Yes, it is. And it's painfully obvious that Walpurg is Nacht, and the fact that the bus has the ability to go to the outskirts on a whim, and we will get to that later, is all just leading into an inevitable and highly unwanted chapter where the Sinners meet the Sephira. Please God, let me be wrong on this. But I'm getting off topic. Let me read it back into something else with Walpurg is Nacht. The announcers. They're just not wanted. And I mean, come on, Malkuth, Pierre and Jack are horrible enough at first, not to mention Yuri for the 10 fat smackaroos. But Angela? The announcers don't feel like pathetic fan service, but instead they just feel wrong. They're sad, they're desperate even. Something about it just feels like Project Moon is trying to market absolutely everything they have. I actually quite like the Effie and Sod ones, also the Yuri one given you ignore the price tag, since these are characters who have history with the Sinners. I've been an advocate for a Hopkins and Aya announcer for a while now, but these three have fuck all to do with the Limbus gang, and it just feels wrong. I'd even say uncaring. Look, it's too late to offer a fix or an alternative for these, and we'd be better off without them, but I just need to stress how silly they are in concept. And I'm only so worked up over Walpurg is Nacht because I know it's only a matter of time until those distortion detective IDs actually happen, and I get depressed knowing this series will never get a proper conclusion. And I wrote that part of the script before chapter 5.5.2 happened, and now I know that the series is getting a proper conclusion, and I need to be careful what I wish for, because it might just happen. And well, Vader, I'm calling you out in particular, because I remember once that you said you'd prefer the announcers since Project Moon isn't selling bikini skins or anything. But at least if they were doing that, they'd be sticking to the one game. But hey, I mean, all's well that ends well. As long as they don't canonize the announcers, it shouldn't be too for fuck. Oh my god, why is everything canon? Seriously, I don't care if we don't see eye to eye, but just sit there and stare me in the googlies and tell me with full sincerity that we really needed mirror dungeons and Railway to be canon. And on top of that, IDs. Project Moon didn't stop at making the game a gacha, they had to make gacha canon to a world that was on its 5th and 6th fucking installments, irreversibly damaging the world building and investment of the story forever. And I'm not pitting this only on Limbus, Leviathan is the one that introduced mirror worlds, but Limbus took it, sprinted 5 meters before marrying its teeth to the footpath. But I'll save my words on Leviathan for another day, probably the full Limbus retrospective. I suppose I should start with why mirror worlds, and more specifically, Dante having the ability to just pull any ID he wants for them, is extremely stupid. Dante, through the power of luck, credit cards, can simply buy his team the hottest new gear from any dimension he wants to crush absolutely any adversary they meet. As of right now, the biggest offender of this are the Orcorp IDs. So, whatever happened to Orcorp being like, you know, an actual threat? Orcorp is the private military that the whole city knows and the whole city fears. But in Limbus, through absolutely zero work or effort, Dante could just get a full team of them, and they just do his bidding to fight what ultimately amounts to street thugs and backstreet bad boys. And this is canon. The enemies canonically see these IDs, and they don't make a single mention of them at all, which is just absurd. Thugs should be sweating at the seams just being around them. Bosses like Cromer should know when to back off, but they never make any mention of it, and this just lessens the rabid standings throughout the city in a very roundabout way. What Project Moon isn't telling us, but instead showing us, is that either every character needs prescription lenses, or that Orcorp are a bunch of chumps who aren't worth the time of day to most people. Which we know from 3 works before this, that Orcorp are not chumps. Oh my god, that sounds like Cope when I say it out loud. They're not chumps. The name of this chapter might seem a little confusing, but I use it because Pokemon is a pristine example for this kind of stuff. Little Timmy straight out of his hometown can get traded a level 50 Bisharp who will most definitely eviscerate everything in sight and strike fear into the enemy's hearts, but it won't listen to him because Timmy hasn't earned his respect yet. Timmy hasn't earned his ability to command such a ferocious force, so the game actively tells you this. Dante should not be allowed to command such strong forces either, let alone even possess them. The rabbits are my first example, but what are we going to do when colours get introduced into the ID mix? And suddenly, Timmy's little Bisharp turns into a Zekrom, and then head IDs, and Timmy has an Arceus. It's just total and utter ludonarrative dissonance. And to further prove my point, we know enemies can see IDs because Cromer has a one-off interaction with
the mysterious black box sinner.
That's one in the entire game. And to be fair, it does make a little sense, even if it does lean a tiny bit into pay-to-win territory by staggering her instead of just being a one-off interaction over the head. You know, something I never see get brought up in multiverse stuff? It's just how many multiverses there really are. Like, you have a new universe for every single tiny detail. Let's just say, for example, Gregor makes a sandwich. There is now a new multiverse where Gregor cuts it sideways, and one into triangles, and one into squares, and one where he raw dogs it and eats a hole. Then there's even more universes for each one, depending on what knife he uses, or how long he takes to cut it, or what's in it, or when he makes it. Do you see what I mean? It's just infinite possibilities from one event. This isn't a criticism of Limbus, or anything to do with Limbus really. This is just a personal observation I have when it comes to multiverse media. I just wanted to share it because I never actually see anyone really bring it up. And Gregor definitely eats a sandwich whole because he's just cool like that. And the very worst part of multiverses is that everything and anything you can think of is canon. I've been on a friend of mine Dem's Project Moon podcast once, broadcast of the city. It's pretty good, you should check it out. And in my appearance, I talked about multiverses and how everything is canon, and I'll just let the clip speak for itself.
Amy, bring up the Dino Dave copy pasta about the mirror.
No,
dungeon.
I'll get onto that right now. Give it to me and I will read it out. Give it to me and I'll read it out. So
Okay,
the only good thing that Infinite Mirror Worlds have ever brought is a personal thing, very personal.
Do you mind can I read it?
You see,
I am a little...
with infinite mirror dungeons and infinite mirror universes and realities, everything is canon. These aren't illusions of grandeur, this is reality. Limbus Company is ultimately and truly fanfiction, so with my very own pen and paper, I can write my own mirror world. One that by all technicalities is canon due to infinite mirrors. One where I am Faust's boy toy, I'm Faust's plaything, her good boy, her snuggle buddy, her pet, and there's nothing you can do to stop
me. Sugar mommy ID win. Am I right?
Okay. I mean, the idea already exists by that logic. Like,
I will.
like Dino Dave is being raw dogged by Faust right now.
No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What am I fighting for?
In my original Day 1 review, I had only beaten Chapter 0 and a part of Chapter 1, and I didn't really say much of my opinions on them. In fact, I haven't really spoken about any of the chapters in length, and I'm saving a lot of my thoughts for my actual Limbus retrospective I do in the future, but I just want to skim over my thoughts of all the chapters as we go through them. And for 0, I haven't really much of anything to say. It's cool, I guess, it's just a tutorial. It introduces the sinners, has some cute Faust art, and that's about it. But 1 is where the show really begins. Talk about solid. Now this is a good chapter, and if I had finished it by the time I made that Day 1 video, I would have been even more ecstatic. Everything about Canto is pure bliss. The enemy designs and the art are pristine, the phenomenal music by Studio EIM, please bring back Dark Fantasy Studios, and the atmosphere just make this chapter really feel like the grimy, shitty city we grew to love in the stuff prior. Even this background art with all the broken basketball court and grey drab colour scheme is so gorgeous, I love it! And the characters, Aya and Hopkins act as incredible reminders of the city's residents, and great characters in and of themselves. Especially Hopkins, I made a whole video on him, goddammit. Hopkins did his job as a smarmy asshole so well that he successfully gaslit half the player base into thinking he killed someone he didn't even kill. And Yuri, yeah, happened, I guess. Honestly, I'm happy she dies, so we don't have a weird self-insert OC stick around with us. That would just be so uncomfortable. The bug guys too have cool grotesque designs that really add to the horror aspect and captured my heart early on. And the length of the chapter is like the cherry on top of it all. It's so perfectly sized because it stops right before it becomes a drag to play. Canto 1 deserves all the praise I can give it, and then some, except for the ending. Blowing your load and showing the main villains this early just feels cheap and fanbaity. If it was 1 or 2 Donnies, I'd be fine, but the whole ass gang showing up really squandered any kind of surprise they could have had later on. And even if it was just Herman and she single-handedly scared the sinners off, it would have been like, damn, this is only one of the members, like, these guys mean business. And I really must praise the severe lack of any kind of Joss Whedon Marvel humour present in this chapter. It takes itself so straight and seriously, to the point where the light moments feel genuinely earned, unlike the Reddit humour we'll get to soon enough. It's this chapter and 2 more later on that show me Project Moon still have it in them to make genuinely good stuff, but they have a phobia against it for some reason. I hope if you get another chapter, Gregor, that it can be as spectacularly solid as this one, but only time will tell. A lot of people hate Canto 1, and I can't seem to understand why. Some people call it boring, but I couldn't disagree more. Like, it's pretty fast and well paced, and you're constantly moving forward. Almost every fight has a point, and you're gradually starting to see some of the Sinner's one-note characteristics show up more throughout the Canto. It's not only a solid and intriguing introduction, but also just a really solid bit of fiction in and of itself. Gregor doesn't really grow as a person though, which is a downside, but I think he'll get another chapter in the future. And he definitely deserves it, because to this day, he's still a severely underutilized character that is just bursting at the seams for possibilities. I mean, just check out the IDs and Eagle that he got this year. He easily sweeps with having the best design of them all. Nearly every ID doing something creative with his arm is just beyond badass, and the ones that give him a normal arm should be removed. I'm being serious, this is fucking stupid. You literally have a character with a free put anything cool here slot, and you give him a normal arm. Shoutouts to his HIV AIDS for being the coolest of them all though. The fact that the arm segments are magnets that can disconnect just makes me wish this was a full ID instead of an ego. It's so creative. Gregor, why are you so cool, my man? You're one of the only good ones, I swear. This is what I mean earlier, though. Imagine if, for beating Canto 1, you unlock G-Corp Gregor, because now in the story it makes some sort of sense for him to have it. And it would also double as a good ID for you in the next chapter, since enemies are primarily weak to slash and pierce there. But the next chapter, this one's going to be a bit controversial. You know what, maybe I should have called chapter 1 that. It doesn't matter. You thought the praise train was stopping here? Dead wrong. I love Canto 2, baby. And I think it's the adorable runt at the litter that got punted and dropkicked by Project Moon. But god damn it, I'm here to give it some love. Canto 2 had such promise to it, but it just misses the mark so hard. The whole gist of it is a casino heist, and goddamn if that isn't one of my biggest weaknesses in fiction. I fucking adore myself a good casino heist. The planning, the scoping out, the general atmosphere and mood surrounding them, it's always so incredible until the actual heist where it all pays off in either a loud blitz through the gambling halls, or a quiet infiltration mission where all the guests upstairs don't even notice anything is off. And Limbus generally nails the vibe of a casino heist, and more so, I just really like the general progression of this Canto as a whole. It just feels like a good adventure. It's a small thing, but I also have a massive soft spot for being able to see the end of your journey from the beginning of it. And this chapter's just going out of its way to push all my good buttons. From the very beginning in the street fights, you see the big J-Corp casino in the background, and you're slowly getting closer as you face adversaries, and then, when you're inside, shit hits the fan and you go up floor by floor until you reach the top where the dungeon happens. The idea is phenomenal and helps the fights feel a little more meaningful, since you're always making ground with every victory, heading up the tower till you reach the apex. With what was considered the hardest boss at launch, wow, how times have changed. Love you, Ada. In the nicest way possible, I hope we never see you again. And the actual casino we get is bustling. Even though all we get is still images and CGs, the vibe it gives off is so alive and real. There is no other area in this game that feels so real and alive. And though this chapter does lack the horror aspects and the style, it more than makes up for it with the story by continuing the trend of death games and people gambling with their lives that was foreshadowed all the way back in the Jong office pages in Ruina. See, that's the kind of fan service I'm looking for, and the kind that rewards the true fans who took the time to read the credenza, and it's subtle too. Really clever stuff, if only more stuff was subtle. The music too, my god! Studio EIM really brought their A game to the table for the absolutely banging tracks in this game. So far this year, nearly every single song has been a banger. Now there is a few duds, but a bad EIM song is still better than 90% of other music on the internet. The jazzy casino tracks just really get you in the mood for a battle, and I found myself listening to them, specifically Canto 2's music, when I play other games recently. They just really get the blood pumping, and the battle theme A, part 1 and 2, both sound like they're straight out of a Sega game. It's gorgeous. Effie and Sod get introduced in this chapter, and as side characters, I like them because they're just cunts to the sinners. They punch down, and it gives not only the sinners, but you as a player the drive to do your best just to shut them up and prove you're the top dogs. The end of Canto 2 also harbours my favourite song in the whole game, Rodion's Story Team. It's a melancholic sad track, but it's just so beautiful and serene. The rest of the solemn songs just kind of blend together for me, but this one, man, the piano is just sublime. Now, is the music as good as Ruina? That's a topic I'm not going to stick my toes into today, but I will say that they do serve entirely different purposes, and with Limbus being a naturally much faster paced game, the blood pumping tracks of Canto 2 really get you in the mindset of an all or nothing fight in the back alleys of City. And that's another thing, we are still very much in the back streets here. The absolute shitholes of the world, and a point I'll bring up later is that I really hate how livable City feels in some of the later chapters. That it loses a lot of its urgency and danger, but Canto 2 keeps that always watch your back mentality in spades while still brandishing a bright and colourful community. Because the laughter and the partying, it's all a facade to keep the death games and gambling addicts at J-Corp out of the public conscious, so they can just keep on partying and living life to its fullest, because you never know when it's going to be your last. And we see that portrayed impeccably near the end of the chapter, where one of the gambling elites, the robot guy, just gets Enocked because he lost a game. This district doesn't give a rat's ass about you or your social standing, because you're here to play and the house always wins, baby. The story is sadly very lacking in Canto 2. It feels rushed and there's no other word for it. Rodion gets basically pushed into the dungeon at the very end and told to go sort shit out. A lot like Gregor, and it just leaves it feeling a little limp. Especially how Rodion doesn't really have a final boss, more so just waves of enemies with the facade of running away from Baba Yaga. If Gregor does get a second chance at life in a future chapter, then I hope to God Rodion does too, because Canto 2 had immense promise with a lot of poor execution. That being said, I still utterly love this chapter and the tone of it all. The comedy never feels forced here, which is weird because compared to chapter 1, this Canto is like night and day in the tonal difference. But it's the actual severity of everything going on and the bizarreness of J-Corp existing in the first place that helps it not feel cheap or forced. And by that I mean, like, this is a massive casino built in the backstreets of a corporation known for its gambling. Like, this casino is almost like a temple to these people, a church even. And as you go through the floors, you go from fighting guards to Yakuza to Mexicans, and just the bizarre difference in enemies really complements the lighthearted moments. Especially because through all of this, you're in severe danger and there is very much a sense of death. But Project Moon cleverly uses that feeling as the gist to the jokes, both visual and literal, instead of just forcing in unfunny one-liners where they really aren't needed. Ryoshu explaining all the different ways to kill someone is a personal highlight, since it just kinda acts as a first real character moment. Up until this point, she stays mostly silent, but she really opens up when the topic of killing people is brought up, and that's just cute character writing. That's all I can really say on Canto 2 for now without getting really in depth, and I want to keep that for my retrospective. A very promising chapter that sadly falls flat at the end and just feels rushed. A take as cold as the ice amalgamations, but god damn, it's just a good solid bit of fiction. Canto 2 gets overlooked a lot of the time when people mention their favourite chapters, and I'm completely guilty of that too. But when people say their favourite chapters, I definitely think the emotional highs is what they're thinking of, or at least subconsciously referring to. And Canto 2 doesn't really have any emotional highs at all. It doesn't have one big roller coaster drop at the end, instead it's just a bumpy ride all throughout. And it's extremely fun and fast paced, I like it a lot. On my personal ranking, it would go under Canto 5, but above 4.5. Love you, Rodion, let's give you a second chance, eh? Now we are finally getting into the content that was added after the game initially launched. After a little bit of wait and a lot of speculation, we got Hell's Chicken, which was the first story update added to Limbus. And on top of that, we got Pierre and Jack IDs, which I've already talked about earlier. And god damn it, stop giving Gregor normal arms. On one hand, I'm still to this day jived with the amount of new Pierre fan art we got from that event. But also, after seeing how far the marketing has gone, it's a little sad in retrospect. One of my favourite videos on this channel, hell, I'd still probably even call it my favourite, is my Season 1 review, where I talked a lot about Hell's Chicken, and why I think it's an affront to God. And while my points are very tired at this point, I have some new ones to add into the mix. So to repeat myself yet again, I don't find the comedy funny at all in Hell's Chicken. And yes, comedy is subjective, but that's my point. If the Canto is all laughs and you don't find those laughs funny, then it just becomes a slog to get through and continue the main story, since you have to beat this chapter to get to Canto 4. The fights were super fillery. Honestly, this Canto could have just been like 3 fights and it would have been fine, but Project Moon needs an Enkefallen dump. And a quote-unquote choke chapter introduces one of the most baffling story decisions I've ever seen in fiction. The concept incinerator. Man, oh man, what can I even say about this thing that hasn't already come out of my mouth or immediately out of your mind? It's a device that can destroy the existence of anything you put into it, and this goes from chicken recipes to ideas to whole fucking people and fixer offices. Some people have unironically tried defending it by saying, oh, but it can only get rid of small offices. Honey, that's the existence of at least 5 people who just got eviscerated from human knowledge. That's a big ass deal. And did I mention the worst part of this whole ordeal is the fact that any old Joe in K-Corp can just use it. And at any time, one of these Barrys can just go, man, that Black Science was right out cunt, wasn't he? And poof, into the concept incinerator, and suddenly Angela is down the footstool. What's my source on it? This Donny! Literally just some chicken shop owner, some random old guy was able to use it to get rid of his rival's recipe. You're lucky he was feeling nice, because he could have just eviscerated your whole bloodline while he was at it. Or all of his competition. Which, why didn't he just do that? Because Project Moon weren't thinking ahead when they introduced it, that's why. Yeah, it gets brought up in Chapter 4 and it's important to Yi-Sang's story, but in all seriousness, why did they have to introduce it in such a comedically incompetent way? And even given the benefit of the doubt that he snuck past some guards to get to the incinerator, look at him! If he can do it, anyone can! That's all I have to add to 3.5 since that video. It's just lame. I find it unfunny and it became much more of a slog for me. Though I will do my civil duty and repeat what I said in my Season 1 review. I absolutely cherish Dawn's ongoing joke about being obsessed with stars, both of the city and the night kind. And how she doodles stars on her notes and cuts spuds into star shapes, it's just adorable stuff. And again, novel character writing. It's not in your face and you'd only really catch onto it if you were looking for it, but it just adds a lot of charm to her and I appreciate it a lot. Mirsol being a master chef is also something that will come up again in a future chapter, but we'll get there in just a second. That's another running gag I quite enjoy because it's mostly visual and it only ever really comes out when it's needed and usually leads to a good smile. Of course, it's really old news now, but the grind was abhorrently bad at the time. You needed 6,000 bongies and having to grind a dungeon for them was infinitely worse than what they have now. I still hate limited time grind ladders, do not get me wrong, but kudos is due to PM for listening to the feedback and making it go from a chore to just something you do while grinding out a few episodes of One Piece on the side. Still not wanted at all, but one step forward is better than 0. This chapter also didn't really do any favours for K-Corp goons now that I look at it. They're kind of treated as jokes and weaklings since they get controlled by the headcrab so easily, but that's made up for in what's easily the most decisive Canto in this entire game. Canto 4 is that chapter for Limbus. The community seems to treat it as if you absolutely love it or utterly despise it, with no in between. But hi, I'm in between. My father was a cruel man. This was the first whole number released after launch and had a lot of hype surrounding it, as it was leaked early on that this Canto was going to have almost as much text as is in the entirety of Ruina, which is a massive amount, and I thought it would be a good thing, but a lot of that text turned out to be filler, and that is the best word to describe 80% of Canto 4. Like, I don't even need to say it, it's been said so much that it loses all meaning, but Canto 4 is ridiculously drawn out with long, unneeded fights that serve zero purpose but to waste your time in Enkefallen. Now, all I want to know is what's the idea behind these fights? I would assume it's to artificially yet still literally add more content so that players technically can't complain about a lack of content, but I don't think that's the case. I think the reason the fights are so drawn out and numerous is to try and drag out the separate parts of the chapter to be as long as they can, so that players have enough stuff to keep them busy before the next third of the chapter drops next week. And sure, if you're playing them weekly, that might suffice, but I can't speak on that because I'm one of those who don't, and personally, I find it a massive pain in my ass. I don't play these parts as they come out. For Canto 4 and 5, I've waited the 3 weeks to be up so that the entire Canto is out and I can play it in one night, and that's for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, I just like the whole story story to be out. That means I can get invested and not be left on any sort of cliffhangers or questions for weeks on end, and instead, I just get to see the whole story how it's intended to be viewed. And doing it all in a single night, it's just a me thing. It takes me a bit to get in the zone when playing a story game, and it definitely makes the whole Canto feel like a big journey when I turn in at 5 o'clock that night. Secondly, it allows Project Moon to iron out any kinks of the chapter. I mean these kinks, not those kinks. These include any visual or audio bugs like these ones, and also any horribly balanced fights that get enough backlash so Project Moon nerf them or buff them accordingly. To put it short, I wait because I want to play it in the most intended way possible, and that way I can critique it justly. But as someone who does wait patiently to play them, these filler fights really jammy my dodger. Canto 5 has a similar issue, but it's not as bad, so like the Hell's Chicken grind, it got better, but only by a little bit. But 2 steps forward, 1 step back is much better than no steps forward, 3 steps back. But to repeat myself again, I will definitely go more in detail on the story when I do my bigger review, but for now, I just want to bring up how fucking boring this chapter is. I just do not care about any of the characters on show here, I'm sorry. Especially the Blue Exorcist trio. When I saw this cutscene for the first time, I deadass said to myself, one of you dies, one of you gets killed, and one of you distorts. And sure enough, I was 3 for 3, even though I didn't know who was doing what yet. This was the part in Limbus where a story started to hit a bad formula, and side characters had become nothing more than depresso vessels who show up to die. The sideshow Bobs and 4 were especially bad though, because they had the emotional depth of something like Twilight. Oh shit, I can't say that now, Twilight's based. And not only were they reusing tropes, but they reused designs too. I can't remember her name, and I think it's Shenhe, but I know that's the one character from the Funny Green website. I'm not ass looking it up, but Chiemi here is just a worse HOD, and that's utterly disgraceful to the book club president. Meet me after class, little lady, and we'll sort out that split personality. I'm on a roll today. He looks like if you took every older brother in anime and just mixed them together. And you're the dickhead from Hell's Chicken! You did this! This boss exists. God love any true free-to-plays who beat her. Forced SP drain is just bad design. But it was the first 7 Sinner fight, which is both really cool and detrimental, since it means you'd have to have 7 IDs ready to go, when prior it was 5 and I think 6 at most. For how awful this fight is, I actually really like Spice Bush's design. It's cool, and the way it grows onto the user's body just adds a parasitic vibe to it and makes it seem super invasive, yet controlled at the same time, much like how you could describe Ego itself. For all the filler fight's flaws, I do love the scrappy robot designs. You can tell these are put together by just backstreet welders because they judder and shake with every movement. You really feel like they're going to explode with one bad turn. And the K-Corp soldiers themselves are sick, especially the Class 1 guards with their pole arms, or glaives? Regardless, they look cool and act cool, but are absolute jokes in combat, which lessens their overall coolness. If I haven't been fighting them for over a year in Mirror Dungeons by now, I'd likely still like them more, but after all that grinding, the novelty is really worn off. Mirror Dungeons and Railways became canon, why? The drones are the best characters in this game, and Heathcliff should have just decked Dongrang in this scene. Why did you all just stand there and watch him hold the bow, you dolts? The singularity is what creates the HP modules, and I like this a lot. The giant eyeball being forced to watch the tragedies is just sickeningly good and solid horror that made me feel uncomfortable when I first saw it. It's extremely city, you know, to just take an almost godlike being and tie it up and torture it for your own gain. So why did they do that with the people? Like, they could have, but we don't get to see people's organs being harvested. No, it's much more important for a chicken farm to be in the main K-Corp branch. God damn it, we were so close! Here's hoping, if we begrudgingly have to go back to K-Corp again, that we get to see an organ farm, because I really do want to explore the horror of instant healing syringes a bit more, other than just some reflection in a glass. Memory wiping is lazy and a cop-out. I know you needed the Sinners to forget it, and City would have this technology, that's believable, but it doesn't lessen the fact that this feels mostly just all for naught, since like no characters remember it except for Dante, and he's already a miserably incompetent excuse for a leader. Just saying, you might not like Hopkins, but it wasn't his fault he got away, it was Dante's. Oh boy, dungeon time! I hope you like spending 3 hours of your time watching your main characters who are already lacking in any depth pretending to be other characters that you care even less about. Aye, what a drag this dungeon is, especially compared to Canto 1's short and sweet one. It doesn't help that you have Satan's cereal bowl in the background the entire time, and it just makes for an overall unenjoyable experience. And what an absolute joke that final boss is. Piss easy. Like, you can win rate Dong Big, but Don Rang just gets railed by looking at him funny. Though, when you do beat him, they included an incredible animation synced up with Millie's song Fly My Wings, and it hits so hard. The emotions were at an all-time high here for me, which is also incredibly impressive since I could not care less about Dongrang if I tried, but I think that's more just a testament to the quality of the animation and music on display here. And I'm going to be dead honest, I feel like people call Canto 4 their favourite chapter because they remember this one scene and nothing else. Like, who was this guy's name? Exactly, it's Marie. Even I had to look that up. The art was getting better at this point. Now that's impressive considering it was already gorgeous, but they really stepped up their A game here. And Faust got an adorable little umbrella. Aww. T-Corp makes an appearance and they're just henchmen maxing. Legends. So all in all, Canto 4 is one that I'm split on more so than any other chapter, and it's because I can't really articulate my issues with it right now. I need to wait and let the story play out a bit more before I can tear into it or praise it, but it's likely going to be the former. I need to wait and see if they do anything awful with the incinerator or just with mirror worlds in general, and they've done bad, but I need to wait for it to happen in the main story and really shake up the beaten path, because right now it just acts as nostalgia bait fuel. Also, please give her back her umbrella, she's so cute with it. That all being said, Canto 4 did spawn my all-time favourite Project Moon meme.
Yo, I just got a message from the concept incinerating moon. Yo, what, the sun shower? I don't know what the hell's chicken this means.
Totally good invention there, Ian. Nah.
That wasn't me, Dongrinthony. I don't play around when it comes to K-Corp.
Hey, yo, I'm gonna go to Shren's department and get an award before I go to work.
Me too, dude. Gonna ham to pang. Dios mío. Bro, there's only one glass mirror left, and I call dibs on it.
You do that, and I send you the concept incinerating moon.
Science, no. You're award-losing department. You who denies all!
The rest will be linked in the description. Please go watch it. It's so golden. This season introduced a second mirror dungeon and season 3 a third one. And I'm not going to talk about the mirror dungeons because they're all just reused asset dump grindstones and not interesting in the slightest. I've already made a video on Canto 4.5 before, and I stand by everything I say about it to this day. It's incredible. At first sight, my heart was in my throat because I was afraid of a fan service filled cesspool, but Project Moon put their big boy willies on and got to work. The pacing in this chapter is solid as iron and feels like a good sturdy story from beginning to end. Not to mention, it's short too with minor filler fights. We do get introduced to the Molar Office, which is... but it's nice to see that they're turning a new leaf over for themselves and doing something different other than just killing people. And the events of Ruinite get mentioned as well, and the library gets name dropped, which... But to reiterate my video on it, I like how fresh the scenery feels compared to being stuck on K-Corp for 3 chapters. It's grimy, mucky, and overall feels like, well, a dump, which is immensely more fun and interesting to me than the White Halls of K-Corp for 10 hours. They shut Dante up and basically had no stupid exposition or superhero tier jokes. Everything was fun, but it still kept a really serious tone that wasn't afraid to take itself too seriously. And it resulted in a very good character piece between Ishmael snapping from fear and anger, and Heathcliff getting pissed at her for raining on the Sinner's parades. Yi-san gets to show a bit more of his new personality here too by trying to act like a mediator, but I love how it's handled because, yeah, he may have changed as a person, but he's still the same scrawny, quiet poet, and no amount of nice words will change the fact that the two loudmouths of the group berate each other endlessly. Ishmael going to kill Heathcliff is an awesome reminder that yes, these are in fact people forced to go on a journey together and not some friend group on a road trip. Ishmael would actually cave his skull in for a few bad words, and that's great. I love it. Good show, don't tell, mwah. The grind was very minimal compared to Hell's Chicken, but limited time stuff is still garbage, no excuses. The story in 4.5 got me intrigued, and Canto 5 infinitely more than Hell's Chicken had me for 4. 3.5 had me scared for 4, but at the first time since launch, 4.5 had me excited for the next update. That's because 4.5 is very character focused. It felt like an actual prelude, and not some absolutely useless waste of time that adds nearly nothing. Instead, it was a tense, thrilling romp, while still maintaining the rest and relaxation scenarios that the sinners deserve. Like Mirsol being a master chef and the rest of them playing volleyball. You can be lighthearted and funny, but you need to balance comedy with seriousness and seriousness with comedy. Too far towards comedy and you have Hell's Chicken, and too far towards seriousness and you have... Well, it hasn't actually been an over serious chapter yet. Leviathan, I guess. The art was adorable, loved this Faust one especially, and they really exaggerated the anime-esque impact effects, especially on the ball here. Lends itself to very punchy panels that make the cutscenes feel animated. Mephi can transform. As I said in my video, I feel like I'll have an issue with this in the future, but for now I don't, and only time will tell. And finally, Heathcliff says crack, which, you know, who's going to tell the translators? I am. Crack is an Irish slang word of Irish origin, and it means good time. It's not English, and unless they have an Irish friend, English fellas definitely don't say it. So either this was a mistake, or Heathcliff has an Irish friend. Either way, it's funny. And I'm happy Ireland got repped somewhere in the game, even if I did physically blow back to my PC when I read it. Also, he says minging. And fuck. I was a happy chappy going into Canto 5, though I still kept my skeptic wits about me. The side content before we got there was certainly lacking, and after a long wait, it finally released. Good chapter! Preying on my love for pirates, are we, Project Moon? You cheeky little bastards. Add some cowboys and then we're even. Now this is the only main story Canto that I did make a video on, and I'm going to say go watch that video instead because I put a lot of emotion into it and I can't recreate it. But to reiterate quickly, really loved Canto 5. It's up there at 1 and 2 for my favourite because the new scenery is incredible, and it's obvious they're pouring a lot of their gambling money back into the art, and it's gorgeous. The comedy isn't horrible, but the serious moments far outweigh them, and it was genuinely such a lovely experience. Canto 5 showed me Project Moon still had it. Yeah, they definitely fumbled the bag with some stuff like the Blue Whale Abno fight, and having that one cutscene that I still use as my pristine example of Project Moon being too scared to take itself seriously. I will make a video on that someday, but I can let these small fumbles pass because oh my god, the goods so outweigh the bads. Not to mention, I wholeheartedly appreciate how much adventure is in this chapter. It earned its length by constantly shifting locations and giving us a nice tour around New Corp instead of just being in the same building the whole time. As I just said, the art is gorgeous. Kinda rushed, but they did fix that by chapter 5.5. Music was mostly reused from earlier chapters, but in the latter half they started doing some original stuff. And god damn, Compass is such a better song than the ones before it. I love all of Millie's songs. They are my favourite band, but I did think they were getting too samey for me. It's really hard to put into words since this is the most me thing of all my opinions, but I just really love the variation in genre with Compass. The techno is gorgeous and really reminds me of Children of the City. At the end of every chapter, each singer gets to sing a cover of the song Pass On, depending on who the focus was. And Ishmael, no contest, has the best one. To this day, it gives me shivers like no other song in the game and makes me feel emotions I didn't even know I could. It's sublime. Her voice act just really cranks it up to 1,000,000 with it. It's so good. But I also love Rodion's because it's very soft and gentle, yet still hopefully depressing. But Ishmael sweeps. That's all I'm going to say for Canto 5. Go watch my video for more. The chapter was great, but I knew it wouldn't last. Is it too on the nose to call this one that? I thought the name was clever. Canto 5.5 is the next filler Canto after 4.5 before it, and it does not live up. Exactly. You see, I find 5.5 extremely just okay. It does one thing awfully, but the rest is neither here nor there, and it's just mostly harmless time wasting. Firstly, I need to give it massive praise for the gimmick fights, where you fight with just Heathcliff and Dawn. I said it at the very beginning of this video, but the stuff is an incredible way to spice up the gameplay. It just acts as good horizontal power scaling, where instead of enemies getting higher numbers, your numbers get slashed, and you have to work around your new limitations. Now, that does get thrown out the window when you swap back to the main sinners, but hey, an attempt was made and I respect and appreciate that. Story-wise, I really don't think we should have seen the outskirts, let alone fucking go to them. The fact the bus can just teleport someone there is silly. This is clearly them setting up for an inevitable ruin at Canto later on, but it just rubs me in all the wrong ways. The outskirts is kind of a taboo subject. I think the less said about the world outside the city, the better, but to portray our first venture into it in the game with a haha Christmas goblins, just dampens the overall threat. Yes, they are killer goblins and they kidnap people, but look at them. They're too goofy to be taken seriously. Despite that, I love the Outskirts Hunter and Crayon. For what we were given, I'm glad we at least got them. The hunter is harsh and stoic, everything you need to be to survive in this wasteland, and he has very little interest in the city dwellers. A stark contrast to the adorable Crayon. Crayon is starry-eyed and wants to know all about the city. She's tragic. Crayon looks at the city every night with hope and admiration. She sees the bright lights of the monumental buildings and hopes to one day live there, thinking it's a better life. But she doesn't realise that under all that glitter lies a shithole arguably worse than the world she lives in. Because at least in the outskirts, she has a village that loves her. And on top of that, being a child, her only question about the city to the sinners is how many crayons are in a box. And man, that just broke my heart. Even saying it out loud now is giving me shivers. I love this little bean, and I hope she grows up to be a great person. Crayon stole the show this chapter, which is ironic because this is meant to be a prelude to Heathcliff's. And he gets some moments, I guess. Like, he does get one sit-down 3am PlayStation party talk with Dante and Don, but it gets undermined by some gnomes appearing and causing a forced fight. But it was nice to see Don be a good friend to him, and for Dante to not be insufferable for once. Though Dante does say this at the end, and let's hope you don't return to the outskirts for another couple of years, or preferably at all, yeah? Up against 4.5, 5.5 is seriously lacking, but it's not as offensively bad as Hell's Chicken, so it gets the pass. Personally, it's on the lower end for me, but they did release another chapter. Chapter 5.5 again? I didn't play Canto 5 3/4, nor did I play Railway 3, because the announcer soured my mood on the game so much at the beginning of this year that I had no intentions of going back to the game. Then a load of real life stuff happened and I caught the big C19 that YouTube hates, and on top of all of that, Infinite Wealth dropped, which is an incredible masterpiece. Please go play the Yakuza franchise. My god, that game was so good. So now I'm here again. Sorry for the wait between uploads, but I don't plan on playing 5.75 anytime soon. I want to let a lot of content pile up as much as I can before I go back, because at the minute I'd be forcing myself to play it and I do need a break from the game, which I've taken at the minute and I'm so refreshed. Even making this video was a huge pick-me-up, and I saw a lot of little stuff I hadn't appreciated before, but the stuff Project Moon has been pulling lately with fan service is just too much, man. Though I do know one thing that they did that I need to mention, and I'm pushing a spoiler warning for the Boys Love chapter here. Okay? Someone has actually cursed me to be unlucky forever, or maybe I should have worded myself better, because when I said I wanted a Distortion Detective game, this is not at all what I meant. Come on! Part of the reason I love Distortion Detective so much and was a shill for it on the daily is because it was self-contained. Like Wonderlab, it just kind of reacted to the main series games like regular City Citizens and never interacted with them, except for Distortion Detective now. I did and still do hold this series so dear. It was my detective fiction self-contained story in the city, like the Judgment to Library of Ruin as Yakuza, but no, they had to go and combine them, and now I shudder for the day Moses and Ezra join the main story of Limbus. To further add on that comparison, this would be like if Ichiban was getting his shit rocked by Sawashiro, and Yagami and Kaito just showed up and started flux fishing his ass while Kiryu commentates as an announcer. Actually, it's exactly like that if we consider Ichiban to be Kiryu's successor, like how Dante is begrudgingly becoming the Sephiroth. Although, Ichiban is one of my favourite characters on Earth, and Dante is one of my least, so it's not that fair of a comparison. Regardless, I am being honest, I don't know the reasoning of their appearance or the context behind it. Sunil just showed it to me, so blame him. But I'm just soured over their appearance itself more than why they appear. One tiny upside I can give is that they are LCA, which means that it shows people who weren't arsed to read it, these are strong ladies who mean serious business. But come on, seriously, why does everyone need to have ties with Limbus now? I'm doubling down on what I said in my Canto 5 video, that I want a web novel or something based exclusively on the Indigo Elder. Because for some reason, he is the closest chance we had to another fully self-contained adventure in this massive continent-sized city where somehow all our characters meet each other and are friends. Like, how does it work? Look, they better have a good explanation, but nothing can mentally prepare me for what comes next. I will ignore all story spoilers going forth, but I need to stay updated on this. Also, there was no Chicon in the event. Boo! I don't want the video to end on a downer note, so instead we can talk about something a bit happier. Drip or Drown. The artists have worked overtime this year and need to be commended for all of their incredible work. They've designed and drawn 2 full-screen splash arts for each ID, which is just so impressive. But I wanted to put on screen here some of my favourites throughout the year and just really let you take in these breathtaking pieces. And hey look, there's my mom! Hey, thanks for watching all the way to the end. I'm just going to let the IDs play out in the background while I talk, because they are pretty gorgeous. It took me a long time to get this one out, and I appreciate the patience and support wholeheartedly. Consider this my late 9k sub special, and please consider subscribing or leaving a like if you did enjoy the video. If you hated it and you got this far, I'm honoured to have such a listenable voice. Thank you. Mwah. I can't promise my next video will come out any sooner because these scripts keep getting bigger and longer, but rest assured the next one is much happier in tone and focuses more on the franchise as a whole, barely even scraping Limbus near the tail end of it. It was originally meant to be this video, but I decided to push that back and push the review first. Also, when I reach 10k subs, I will immediately start work on the Lobcorp and Ruiner retrospectives, but they will take a long time to cook in the oven. So there will be videos in the meantime, but I'll just tip away at all of them when life gives me a chance. I have been asked before, will my memes come back? And yeah, eventually. But like anything, I don't want to release something unless I put a ton of effort into it, so PSAs and shitposts will return eventually when I'm proud of the ones I make. But that's enough talk. Love ya, but I gotta leave ya. See ya on the flip side.